Okay. Gary, you can hear me, right? Okay. Good evening, everyone. People are still coming in. We are expecting quite a few hundred people that will be joining us on Zoom, YouTube, and on Facebook Live. In fact, it looks like we're hundreds of people joining in, and it's. I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Chevra Kadisha Synagogue, the Chevra Fall Committee, Program Committee, Leo and Ruth Huberman, and the entire committee for bringing wonderful, inspiring, and beautiful get-togethers throughout the fall and during this pandemic, so we could come together as a community and learn a little bit and try to build our spirituality that is so much in need and thirsty. We have with us tonight a very special guest, Charlie Harary, who has been in Montreal in our synagogue a number of years ago when the Polachek family, Claudia and Gary Polachek, and the entire Polachek family brought him in. And he made a tremendous impact visiting the schools and with the Shabbaton. And I want to thank the Polachek family for bringing Charlie back to us again. And a big yasher koach for bringing this educational, inspiring night to our larger community. Charlie, welcome. I just want to, before I give Gary the honor of welcoming Charlie, I just want to say to you that I've read some of the reviews that is going to be tonight the topic of discussion. We're in a very beautiful month of Kislev. There's a light snow falling in Montreal tonight. But we are looking forward to the lights of the Hanukkah menorah to brighten our spirits. And that combined with Charlie's book, which is a big hit, Unlocking Greatness. I've read, Charlie, some of the reviews, and you've really changed people's lives, literally changed people's lives. This book is a hit. And I have to say, I read it. I'm probably going to read it again because I started doing some of the things while I was reading it. I started meditating and trying to incorporate some of the guideposts that you were laying out. So this is not just a one-time read. This is something that you want to keep with you. It's going to make you a better person, a stronger person, a bolder person, actually a new person. So when I started reading the book, I started thinking of Charlie as a neuroscientist, and then as a clinical psychiatrist and a psychologist and a philosopher and a mystic and a guidance counselor and a life coach. I said, oh my God, who's this Charlie Harary? And all this wisdom wrapped in one book is really amazing. I recommend it. I love the way Charlie draws in the reader. And you engage the person throughout the book. And I am somebody who appreciates comedy, and I use it a lot in the rabbinate. I love the way you sprout on the pages your humor and the stories to ease the intensity of the message that is so powerful. Charlie, I've seen you on Esha Torah. I've watched your Dvar Torahs, always so passionate, animated. And while I was reading the pages of the book, I saw you like jumping off the pages and using your hands and just so eager to share the wisdom that you've accumulated and the research that you've put together in this wonderful, wonderful journey. So I know many who have joined here tonight have said to me they've read the book, they love the book. So tonight is we're going to talk about where we are today in the month of Kislev. And we're going to hear Charlie's insight into the book. And I would like to give the honor to Gary Polachek to introduce Charlie Harary.
Thank you, Rabbi. Erev Tov, bienvenue, good evening. What a treat it is to welcome Charlie Harary. Charlie is a modern Renaissance man with interests, passions, and expertise as diverse as venture capital, real estate, strategic counsel, law, motivating teams of excellence, and spirituality. Yet Charlie has found a way to connect these dots of his wide-ranging expertise. Charlie has become a sought-after international speaker and author whose book, Unlocking Greatness, challenges us to leave behind regrets and disappointments and instead focus on our unique purpose and how we can realize our potential, going all in to bridge the gap between the life we have and the life we want. His wisdom, rooted in Jewish thought, has resonated with the universal audience. As the rabbi mentioned, we had the pleasure of hosting Charlie for a fantastic Shabbaton back in 2012. Perhaps most impressive is Charlie's ability to balance all these interests and passions with a beautiful family. He and Dina are the proud parents of 5 kids. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Charlie Harary.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Rabbi. What kind and honored words from both of you. I'm so touched. You know, I remember the shul well. I remember getting there. And for those that are part of this incredible place, you know, everywhere, with God's help, I hope I should have the opportunity to go places and see Jews and see people. And each shul, each synagogue has it's a smell. It's something special. It's something. It's hard to put your hands on, but like when you go to different places, you learn. And from the second I walked into that massive, awesome shul, the feeling was warmth. It was 100% warmth from every person that I met, the different minyanim that were there. Everybody got together, and the rabbi, the rebbitzin, the whole family, the whole community. It was special from the beginning. So thank you, and thank you to the Polacheks. And it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be back connected with Montreal. I'm sad I couldn't be there in person, but I'm happy to be connected nonetheless. So thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to getting into a conversation about things that I think are critical today. I want to share with you what I believe is the soul of the book. We can talk about the research and the things that we did, and I look forward to your questions, and I want to delve into it with you, because this topic of greatness is a topic that is close to my heart, because I believe it is our birthright. But like the rabbi said, we're in the month of Kislev. We're in the month of greatness. This is the month where greatness was brought out in a way that it was never brought out like this. And I would be remiss to jump into anything but first the middle point, as they say in Hebrew, the nekudah hapanim, the middle point, the essential element of what the entire book is rested on. It's actually, if you read the book, it's very much connected to the story about me going up to the ancient city of Tzfat and meeting with the mystic. So all of us love underdogs. No? You ever hear stories of underdogs, sports stories of teams that were supposed to lose, get on the field, work their hardest and win? Stories of individuals that come in, Holocaust survivors that show up on our shores, rebuilt families. Whenever we hear a story, we are immediately taken if the story is one that is an underdog. The idea that David can beat the Goliath seems so right to us. If there was ever a month, if there's ever a story of the underdog, it's right now. This is the month of the underdog. Because in this month, in the 2nd century, what happened was the Jewish people were living in Israel. And 332 BCE, a man named Alexander the Great came in, and he introduced into Israel Greek culture. And over the next few years, over the next 100 years, the Greek culture started to infiltrate into the system until finally, in the 2nd century BCE, the Jewish people, the whole state of Israel was in turmoil. There were warring parties. And the Syrian Greek king, a man named Antiochus, showed up and said, you know what? We were trying to get rid of Judaism for a long time. No more Mr. Nice Guy. It's over. From now on, if you talk, dress, look, act Jewish, you're dead. That's it. You study Torah, you die. If you're a rabbi, you die. You keep Shabbat, you die. If you give your son a Brit Milah, and we find out at any point, we hang you and we tie your child around your neck. We're not messing around. This isn't Alexander. Let's try to get everybody excited. This is Antiochus. Antiochus comes in and says, it's over. Judaism, as you know it, is over. You know what happened? Most people said, okay. They didn't want to say okay, but you know what? No one wants to put their kids on a bus to a school to have the school brought in by officers killing all the kids. There's a level. No one wants to walk around and not know if they're going to live or die because they're Jewish. And one by one, town by town, family by family, they started to give up Judaism, and Judaism was literally being choked to death. How would you ever stay connected to Judaism? So they would run to the hills and they would live in caves. And during the day, they would hide in caves, and these small pockets of Jews at night would come out. And at night, they would practice a little Judaism to not forget it. But they never thought in a million years that this would possibly survive. And one day in a town called Modi'in, there was a Jewish informant that told the Greek officers that there was a family of priests that was still there. And the father's name was a man named Matisyahu. He was like a king priest. He was a chief. And the Greek soldiers came to this town. Can you imagine? Surrounded the cave, drew out this family and said to him, if you're not going to sacrifice a pig, I'm going to kill you. And this old holy man said, enough is enough. I mean, come on. And as he was resisting, one of the informant jumped in and said, I'll do it. And a fight broke out, and one of his sons, in defense of his father, kills the officer. And they realized that this was it. They had no other choice. And for the next 3 years, can you imagine Hanukkah? 3 years, a bunch of priests take up the most impossible fight ever to somehow fight the Syrian Greek army for independence. Listen, these are priests. They were rabbis. I love my rabbi. I do. I go to him for wisdom. If I'm getting into a fight, I'm not calling my rabbi. Like, we're Jews. We have a lot to offer this world. We could outthink. We can out-wisdom. We can out-sue. We can out-heal. We can out-guilt people, but we're not a very tough people. You don't see guys come out of a bar and be like, yo, the yeshiva let out. I don't want to mess with the Jews. It just never happens. We're not tough. Rabbis aren't tough people. Think about it, a bunch of rabbis. Can you imagine? Got together and went up against the commando force of the army. The greatest army in antiquity, the Greek army, and won. After that, the most incredible miracles upon miracles that was literally saved the Jewish people from annihilation. They run to the temple. They get back to Beit HaMikdash. And they didn't have to, but they wanted to bring out the menorah. And they also didn't have to, but they wanted to have pure oil. And they searched around, but all the oil was all it was all defiled by the Greek soldiers, but they didn't want to put in defiled oil. And according to the basic Jewish law, according to the letter of the law, since everything was defiled, had they lit with defiled oil, it would have been okay, but they didn't want to. And they pushed and they pushed and they pushed, and they found one jug of oil. Remember the story? And they put the jug in and they light it, and it lasts 8 days. This, by the way, the modern equivalent is if your phone has 10% and it goes for 8 days, that's like the modern equivalent of the Hanukkah holiday. Once you go from the low battery to 8 full days, that's what it's like. Holy cow. Hanukkah. Now, let me ask you a question. If you were on the holiday committee, if you were on the rabbinic holiday committee, making the holiday of Hanukkah, and on the table, someone says, hey, we have this holiday called Hanukkah. What should be the symbol of Hanukkah? What would you choose? Like, what's the thing that's going to really remember the miracle of Hanukkah? What would you choose? Oil? Would oil even make it to the conversation? We almost died. We fought the Syrian Greeks for 3 years. That was insane. At the end, we wanted to do a good thing, and yeah, God hooked us up with another close miracle, but that was after the credits rolled. That was after the movie was over. That was after we were all living. Can you imagine? We almost died. The symbol of Hanukkah shouldn't be oil. And because we're Jews, we somehow not only light oil, now we eat oil, and because we Jew it up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess now, because like there's oil, so if I eat a donut or a latke or I deep fry anything, there's a mitzvah. Sure. Because if there's a substance we can have to turn to food, it's awesome. But like the oil, that wasn't even in the story. If you were making a symbol for Hanukkah, wouldn't you make it a sword? We shouldn't be eating donuts in the living room. We should be doing push-ups in the dining room. Hanukkah, we should be sitting around not lighting candles. We should be doing like sword fights. The symbol of Hanukkah, the miracle of Hanukkah, the stuff that really changed. The oil was at the end. And what if there wasn't oil? What would have happened? If we lost the battle, we'd be dead. Why in the world is the symbol of Hanukkah the oil and not the sword? So I want to tell you a story. So a bunch of years ago, I was in Pasadena, California. I was doing a business deal, and I was making a presentation to investors. And it was a whole group of investors, most of which I didn't know. And I was making a presentation about whatever, a deal in front of me. And after the deal was over, it was right after the Giants had just won the Super Bowl. 2008, for those who are football fans, the Giants beat the New England Patriots. I'm from New York, I'm a Giant fan. And the game was coming down to the end. And just when the game was about to be over, the quarterback, Eli Manning, was running and people were chasing him, and they grabbed his jersey and pulled it down, and he, as opposed to going down, which he should have, he spun out of the way and he threw the ball, and the receiver made the catch, and they won that Super Bowl. So man comes up to me, it was the day afterwards, I was on the airplane. So it was Sunday, I was on the airplane Monday, this was on Tuesday. So I'm giving my presentation, and coming, making a beeline for me was the scariest looking dude I've seen in a long time. Mid-50s, 6'1", 200 pounds of all muscle. You know those types? Ex-military. In America, we got a whole bunch of these guys. Ex-military. You see them on the news and stuff. Tattoos, tough guys. Comes right after me. Military style. Boom. And I'm like, I don't know what he wants. So he comes up to me and he puts out his hand. And he's one of those guys that, you know those guys that like when they shake your hand, you're not sure if like you have all your fingers are still not broken, you know, and they just like crack, but you can't say anything because like you're supposed to have a tough handshake too. So you have to pretend. Shakes my hand, breaks some fingers. He goes, hey, I'm like, hello. So he introduces himself. I said, nice to meet you. He said, great game last night. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I loved it. I go, yeah, me too. The Giants won. He goes, that's not why I loved it. I loved it because of the last play. I said, yeah, it was great. He says, you know what I saw? I saw what's called the hero's moment. I said, the what? He goes, the hero's moment. I said, what's the hero's moment? He goes, you got a minute? I'm like, I mean, what, am I going to say no to you? Like, yeah, as long as you want. So he says, I'm ex-military. I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured. So he says, I was a Navy SEAL. He was a commando. And he got injured, but he didn't want to leave the Army. He wasn't ready. So they put him in the academy, but he wasn't like a statistician. So his job was to work on the mental fortitude of the soldiers. He says, you know, in battle, there's three types of soldiers. He says, they're good soldiers. Soldiers that do everything right. They get up on time. They do make their beds. They do their push-ups. They run their things. They're good soldiers. Because then they're great soldiers. And great soldiers go beyond the call of duty. They're up first. They finish last. They're always helping people. They're the ones that are at the head of every single class. They're the great soldiers. He goes, but you know what happens when you actually get to battle? Usually something in battle goes wrong. Usually in battle, something just goes off. And nothing makes sense. And when you have to go do something, or you have to go and take that hill or save that person or keep on fighting, but all your training goes out the window and all the situations are different than you ever learned it. Good soldiers are gone. Even the great soldiers are gone. But even in those moments, there are those few people. There are those few soldiers that when everything goes wrong, when everything seems dark, they just never give up. They never say quit. There's something that they reach into in the middle of a battle, in the middle of a trial, that they reach into something and they become something they could never have been before. And that is the moment that those soldiers become heroes. And my job in the army was to identify the hero's moment. The moment where everything goes wrong and you never give up. That's life. Life has a way of sending us things that we never anticipate. And there are good people that are trying to do what's right. And there are great people that are always going the call of duty. But when life is good and things are green, it's hard to see what's on the inside. But then things go a little off. The world shakes. The marriage shakes. The kid isn't developing like you think he would. There's challenge at work. There's challenge at home. There's challenge with health. There's challenge on the world stage. Things happen in life. And when things happen in life, there are those few people that somehow have the ability to dig into a place and become something that they never thought they possibly could have been. But in these moments, they become something that is unbelievable. They tap into their own inner heroism. And this man explained to me that was what he saw in the quarterback at that moment. That's the story of our lives. The story of our people. If you want to understand our people are a people that live off the backs of heroes. This whole world that me and you live in right now, the world of North America that me and you get the opportunity to enjoy in part, came from people that grew up in a world that tried to annihilate them. We live off the backs of survivors that come into this country. They weren't trained to survive. They didn't get education growing up. If your family gets exterminated in the Holocaust, here's how you rebuild. My grandparents who are Holocaust survivors, my grandparents didn't have anything. No one taught them anything. How did they come out of the ashes of the Holocaust and rebuild? Because when the going got tough and they were able to come to this country, they dug into something. And they pulled out strength that they never thought possible. And they rebuilt a family, which rebuilt a world. My other grandparents, because some of you may or may not know, my mother comes from Munkach, my father comes from Syria, which makes me a whole walking United Nation, which is another story for another time. Everything that I eat either has margarine or hummus. That's my life. My Syrian grandparents that woke up one morning in a world that moved on them, had to run for their lives. My grandma came in, her husband died. How did they do it? Where did they get it from? Look at where we live. Look at the state of Israel. You think when we always have people living in Israel, but you think when we had immigrants coming to Israel back to our homeland for thousands of years, you think they were met with like care packages from the Arab neighbors? Welcome back, like we missed you. Here's some hummus and hashish. I hope it works out for you. They got a message. You got 15 minutes to go back to Europe where you're from, or we're driving you into the Mediterranean. There's no Air Force. There's no military academy. How'd they do it? Because a bunch of Jews looked up and said, we're not going back home. We're home and we're never leaving again. This is our homeland. And we're never leaving ever again. And if we've got to fight, and if we've got to figure it out, we will not sleep, we will not eat, we'll do whatever it takes, we're not leaving. They dug in to something that was inside and became heroes. Me and you live on the shoulders of heroes. That's how our people survive. Where does this come from? What were they on? How'd they get it? So I want to share with you one idea. And then I'll take questions. But I want you to understand this. Because this is the center of everything in that whole book. And I believe this is center of everything. This is center of everything. God created the world. First he created angels, but they all listen. That's not fun. Then he created animals. There's nothing there. That's not fun. So he did something that was insane. God did something so incredible that it is beyond even our comprehension to think about it. It's so incredible that most people can go their whole lives and never think about this once. Literally, you can go your whole life and never for a second think about this. God took an animal, lifted it on its 2 feet. Me and you. We're an animal. We're a body. We eat, we drink, we sleep. And he lifted us on our 2 feet. Then he took a piece of himself, the infinite, all powerful, all everything, the infinite, took a piece, and that, you can't take it home, God, right? A ray, and he stuck it inside us. So inside me and inside you is actually the piece of divine. Somehow along the way, God got stuck up. I don't know how this happened, but somehow we put God up there. Where's God? Up. Where do we pray? Up. Where's heaven? Up. I don't know how God got up. And the game we play with God is, I got me, my life, and you got what you need. I don't know. I don't know. I'll pray and you hook me up, like, right? Is that how it works? You need like prayers and foods and certain things, and I need health, happiness, and some money. It's a deal, right? It's called Amazon.God, right? So I'll do what you want. You do what I want. And if I'm doing what you want and you don't deliver, like, what's up? Like, Amazon's got Prime. Like, what's taking you so long? We think God's up. He's not. God's not up. You know where God is? He's in. God is in everything. In everything is pulsating with the energy of the divine. Me and you are built with the divine. In Hebrew, this is called chelek Eloka mimal, a piece of God from above. One of the greatest books ever written in the history of the world was a book called the Tanya, written by the Bala Tanya. The Tanya is like a nuclear power plant. And the Bala Tanya says, he adds one word to this. Listen to this. Chelek Elokam mimal, a piece of God from above. And the Bala Tanya says, mamish. That means literally. Not figuratively. Not, that's a nice idea. That's cute. Oh, I heard that. That's cute. Oh, yeah, it's nice. What he means is, if my eyes are open, they're only open because I got God in me. If your eyes are opened, I don't care if you're into it or not into it. We're connected, we're not connected. I feel inspired, I don't feel inspired, whatever. If my and your eyes are open right now, the energy that is powering our body is the infinite. Which means there's nothing in this world that can get in my way. Now, my body may slow me down. But who I am is infinite. When the Maccabees stared at those Greeks, they understood that the only way they're going to win is if they dig into a place they've never dug before. And the story of Hanukkah is not the story of us winning. If the symbol of Hanukkah would have been a sword, the rabbis understood that, you know what would happen after a bunch of years? This whole story of Hanukkah would have been like some military maneuver. We had the guerrilla uphand. We were guerrilla warriors. We were able to, manipulate the terrain. We missed the whole point. If you look at this world, what you'll find is that the property that the Torah speaks about, which is the closest related to your soul, is fire. Fire is what you light when someone passes away, a yahrzeit candle. Fire is what brings in Shabbat, because that's the holiest day of the week. Fire, you can almost look at it. It's like if you even look at a candle, right? The wick is the flame is almost like reaching back up to heaven. If it's not being held down by the wick, it doesn't even have property. And the Torah teaches us that fire is like the soul. In Hebrew, it's Kiner Hashem Nishmat Adam. The soul is like fire. The Maccabees didn't run into the temple because they wanted to, they were nothing to do, so they picked the menorah, randomly. They were sending a message to the people. Don't you think for one second this was military. This was spiritual. We dug in. And when you dig into that body, you tap into that soul, you can beat the Greek army. And they pulled out that menorah for everyone to see, and they lit those candles. God didn't have to proof a miracle. God did it so that we would never forget what this is about. Fire. Hanukkah is not about lighting candles. It's about being candles. We have to be the candle. We have to realize that we're living in a time right now that is desperate for leaders. We're living in a time that gets hard. Relationships are strained. Kids are struggling. The world is struggling. And what God needs more than anything in the world are people that can dig in and realize that underneath this thing called my body is my soul, and that's infinite, and I can find things in there. And if I'm willing to fight hard enough for greatness, it's my destiny. And the candle. That's why Hanukkah takes place in the winter. Because it's during dark times do candles matter. We're living in Hanukkah. We've been living in Hanukkah since March. We've been living in Hanukkah for months. The only difference now is now we got the candles coming. When I sat with the publishers to write Unlocking, to name Unlocking Greatness, the publisher was very concerned that the title would have to line up with their social media campaign, people buy books and yada, yada, yada. I said, I want the title to be Unlocking Greatness. And they said, well, we don't know. We're doing Google searches on it. We don't know. I'm like, that's what I want. They go, how come? And I said to them, I said, you know why? Because one of the greatest misconceptions that people have is they think they have to be great. No one ever has to be great in life. You're born great. You should have to learn how to unlock it. It's in here. It's infinite. You just don't know how to unlock it. This whole book is about one thing: unlocking the greatness that is within. And I tell you now, we had a conference call, and the head publisher said, okay, we're going with that. And I don't care if it doesn't work. We're going with that. Because that's what this stands for. That's what the book's about. That's what the Jewish people are about. The Jewish people are basically a bunch of people that never go down. Because God makes us fight for what's right. He makes us fight to survive. And in creating a world that could be easy, we could have been born in like some island somewhere and he could have left us alone. Making us fight for greatness is what brings out and makes us uncover that peace inside us, that candle. And my blessing to this awesome audience who I wish I can see. You know, it's hard for me. I'm looking at all your names and I wish I could see your faces. I miss seeing human beings, especially from Montreal. But my blessing to you is that you never for 1 second forget who you are. Never forget that you're infinite with a body around it. There's nothing in this world that can overwhelm us. Because even when things get hard, it just is an opportunity to bring out the hero that's inside us. And Hanukkah reminds us that as much as it's dark, as the army surrounded those Maccabees, so those moments, they brought out the candle inside them. And let me end with this and I'll turn to the rabbi. If you notice something amazing, Hanukkah is the last holiday historically that we have. We have modern day holidays, but the last rabbinic holiday was Hanukkah. The last mitzvah, really, the last miracle that we have in our history. We had a lot of miracles, split seas, and, God gave us the Torah. Like, we had manna from heaven. Like, God poofed a ton for us. The last thing God poofed for us, the last miracle, was the light. Why? And I'll end with this and I'll turn to the rabbi. My grandmother, she should rest in peace, just passed away recently. She's a Holocaust survivor. She told me that before she left her house, her mother knew that this was it. Before the trains came to the neighborhood and took everybody away, her mother sensed that she would never see her kids again. So she reached her hands into the box of jewelry that she had, and she gave each one of the kids a trinket that would remind them of her family. And she gave my grandmother a locket with her picture so that she would never forget her mother, to hold on to forever. And of course, those Nazis ripped that out of my grandmother's heads. They should burn where they belong. But my grandmother had that locket that she held on to it until she got to Auschwitz. The last thing you give somebody is the thing you want them to remember the most. The last thing that God does for us before he sends us into the exile. He's still with us, but the last thing, the last miracle God gives us is the candle to remind us, as dark as it gets, don't forget I'm inside you. Don't forget your fire. Don't forget that you're a piece of me. And as dark as it gets, you're the one who can light it up. My blessing is that we should be those people. We should shine our lights, because when it's the darkest, that's when your light shines the brightest. And together, our lights should join together to be a bonfire. Maybe, just maybe, together we can really, really light up the world. Okay, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Remarks. I'm all yours.
Thank you, Charlie. That was powerful, moving, deeply moving, and powerful, and a message that we all so need to hear, particularly today. And I think your book probably speaks more today than it did 2 years ago. At least it's needed more today, because sadly, in the world we're living in, so many of us are looking outside to find greatness. So many of us are looking at heads of states, prime ministers, presidents, and we're trying to find greatness in other people. And a lot of people are very disenchanted by that. And what you said tonight and what you bring across in your book is greatness is not out there. Greatness is not something you search for in another person. Greatness is right there inside of yourself, and we need to learn how to unlock it. So I think tying your book into Hanukkah is beautiful, and I want to thank you very much for that very powerful, impacting presentation. I would like to invite people who are on Zoom or on Facebook Live to type your questions if you might have. There's no way we're going to be able to get through everyone's questions, but I'll try to choose a few from those who will post. Charlie, while I was reading your book, and as we'll give people a chance to type out their questions on the chat, I thought of the Tzemach Tzedek. You mentioned the Alter Rebbe, the Tanya. The Tzemach Tzedek lived a little over 17th, 18th century. Also, his name was Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the original Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He's credited of saying in Yiddish, "Trach gut, wird sein gut." Think good, and it will be good. And it became kind of coined since his saying. And as I'm turning the pages, I keep on hearing his words, the power of thought, and how it changes our reality. Or what the Baal Shem Tov said and brought to the world, "B'makom shemachshavto shel adam, sham hu nimsa." The place where your thoughts are, that's where your reality is being created. And these are terms that, although in the modern day we would call it perhaps neuroplasticity, and driving our own life through the power of our thoughts and our minds, it just resonated so powerfully, particularly, myself, who's been studying these mystics and Chassidut, and I'll tell you, one of the things I little bit regretted, if I could give you a criticism but yet a compliment, is here you're going chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're peeling off the layers. You're peeling off the layers of desire and wants and needs and the power of thoughts and who are we really and what do we really want, and you finally get to that, as you started today's talk, that trip to Tzvat, to the mystical city, and you went into this wonderful concept of, which I've learned, of yichud, the concept of yichud, of unity, that the whole world is really one being unified as one existence. I just wish you would have spent a little bit more time with that. I was hungry to hear more of the mystical element of the soul that you finally reached in that peak. But I understand that this is a book that you want to try to keep it practical and keep people engaged. So, which leads me to, I'll ask the first question tonight, and I'm sure you've been asked this on many occasions. I read many of the 1990 self-help books. Stop the Insanity and Susan Powter and Scott Peck and all of these self-help books. There was an explosion in the 90s until today. How do you see your book being different? How do you see it? What unique chapter does your book open up as opposed to all the other self-help books that are out there?
There's two pieces of it that I think is critical for us to remember. First of all, in the 90s, they didn't have any of the data that's coming out now on neuroplasticity. Like, for those who aren't aware, the science of our brain is exploding now, right? Being alive in 1990 and being alive in 2020 gives you insight to an entirely different brain. The mind, as they're learning now, is neuroplastic, which means it's constantly changing and regenerating. So every time you have a thought, the thought is actually creating an actual connection in your brain, which means your thoughts are changing brain structure. And your lack of thoughts are actually removing brain structure. So what was once a world of, you get what you get and you don't get upset. Like, you think you know what you know. And if you hit a certain age, those days are very different right now. And so once we learn that our mind is plastic, that means that I can become somebody tomorrow that I didn't possibly think was possible today. I can learn something and review it and repeat it and wake up one morning and it feels normal to me. I can learn habits and behaviors that will one day, if I repeat them in my mind long enough, will actually feel like me, because it's getting into my head and it's creating neurostructure. I can restructure my own mind to some extent. There's certain things that are so built in, but that research didn't exist in the 1990s. And so much of what's available now for us, so much of who we can be, this idea that we can dig into our soul and become something, was once only a spiritual concept. And then maybe you can reach in and have discipline. Now science is teaching us that it's actually, you can change your brain. You can change your brain to, in the book, for those who remember, there's research of people seeing through their tongues. There's research of people learning how to do things that wasn't possible. There's research of people with half of brains teaching their other half of brains how to act, because the brain is so adaptive to your environment, and great environments allow you to grow and negative environments continue to make you negative. And so the first thing that's critical is just the research is different. And the second thing is that at the end of the day, all this talk about change really only works if you are a person of change. If we're a body, then really we're just a finite being that's getting older and older. If we're a soul, that means that every day that soul allows us to tap into some energy that is literally beyond what we thought was possible. I don't know how self-growth works without the concept that we're souls, and without the recognition that what's inside me is so much greater than what's on the outside. Now, once we combine, my brain adapts to anything, and I've got an infinite power. We could just get those two concepts into into our awareness. I mean, the future is totally different. And that to me is like, once those two things became clear for me, like, I couldn't write quick enough. I couldn't get the words out, because I wanted more than anything in the world for someone. Because if you ever like me grew up, I went to a wonderful academic, Orthodox prep school where I was never enough and never enough. The kids who are in fourth grade are a little smarter, everyone else is still. I went through a world in law school, we go through worlds sometimes where people like put us into boxes because that's just easier. And if you fit into a box, great. But if you don't, then the recognition that, of course you don't. There is no box in this world. You're making your own boxes as you go. To me, it's very empowering. You're muted, Rabbi.
One of the moments that kind of hit me was when you said in a highly descriptive manner, "You're not your mind." And I think most people think they're their mind, because that's what's always thinking and that's what's always calculating and computating. And we live in our mind. So we kind of buy into this belief that this is who we are. And when you kind of said, "You're not your mind, you're the driver of your mind," like your thoughts can control your mind, that kind of hit home for me, because it helped me kind of take a step back and say, hey, my mind is like my hand. If I wanted to pick up something, I'll have it pick up. It doesn't have to be all encompassing. It's not me. And that kind of really hit me. Something that's coming in from the chat, someone's asking, going back to the light, this person reaching out to you, can you please ask Charlie, what happens if you don't see the light in yourself anymore?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I want to tell you, it's so funny that whoever that person was, I have a show every morning live on Zoom and on Facebook called Daily Boost. If it's okay, I'm going to send you, for those who want, on link on Zoom. If you want Rabbi to post it on Facebook, you can. It's called the Daily Boost. It's a daily show live every morning, 9 a.m. And then we post it on all the social media platforms, on Instagram and on Facebook. And it's every day. And the reason why we did the show every day is because of your questions, which is these principles only matter when you talk them out slowly. We're literally having this conversation right now. Today, it's amazing. This morning's boost was this question. What happens if you don't see it in yourself? This was four. I know when you come to Montreal, that's what all the stuff happens. So like, the WhatsApp group is full. Well, if you by tomorrow, I will I'll update the link tree. So for those who want to get in the WhatsApp group, they can. So this morning we spoke about it. One of the great mistakes we make in life is that we think that we need somebody else to tell us that we are the light. And when we allow somebody else to control that feeling, if we don't get it growing up, it hurts. If we didn't get from our parents or from our administrators or our teachers, we walk around thinking that we're not. And it's because we think that in order to feel something, someone had to have told us. Once we realize that whether anyone recognizes it or not, it's irrelevant. If my eyes are open, the energy that is within me is God. That idea in Kabbalistic terms, Yichud Hashem, that idea written by the greatest minds of all time, the Baal HaTanya being one, that idea which is really at the bedrock of the inner Jewish principles. Not an idea that I'm bringing up and saying, trust me, rah, 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 yes, you can. I'm not like saying like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. They're like, I don't know. Charlie said I can. This isn't Charlie Harary. These are real genius, holy souls from the generations. This is, I would say, one of the basic tenets in Judaism. Once we grapple with the idea, and not like it's a cool idea that I think for 5 more minutes. Once I think about this for the next 5 hours, sometimes I'll lay in bed and I'll think about it, and I can't even get my head around it, and I'm doing it for months. Sometimes I'm walking down the street trying to be like, what does that mean? Thinking about it. What happens is we start breathing with something that, like, I can't describe it, but if you try it, you'll see. Not you, Rabbi, everybody. I'm sure you try it all the time. I'm sure you've read through Tanya a billion times, right? Once we try it, wait a second. That means that the infinite is inside me? Wait a second. That means that the infinite is inside me? We stop needing other people to tell us how great we are. We stop holding on that mom never told me that I was good enough and that my sister is smarter than me. And we stop holding on that dad never thought I'm important enough. And when I was in, we dropped that stuff because that's how everyone else psychologically has to grow. My mom is a psychologist, which explains a lot, which is a whole nother story for a different time. And my mom wrote her thesis on this, on how psychologically everyone needs someone else to believe in them. Psychologically, for normal psychological development in human beings, they need another person outside them to believe in them. And there are a lot of people that don't have that because they're still in the world of the mind. But if you go past your mind and realize that your mind is a tool, it's a muscle, it's neuroplastic, it's a computer, it's like your arm, it's just more sophisticated. Once we go past our mind to our soul and start to realize, wait a second, I got what? And this, Barbara asked the question, if I could just say it right, I'm just going to just respond to Barbara.
Go ahead, please.
Is every soul a good soul? There's no such thing as not a good soul. The body may do things that block the soul. The body and the mind may block the soul's influence on ourselves. But if it comes from God, it's got to be good. This idea that we come from God sends shockwaves into who I am. And I don't need someone to tell me how great I am. I don't need someone to not me personally, right? I'm working on myself like everybody else, but we as humans, we can feel like we're the light even if no one tells us. You know what happens then? This is where it gets fun. What happens then is that we start realizing how awesome this is, and we start realizing that the greatest thing I can do is bring out the light in someone else. We can start telling people how great they are, because once you touch into this is the greatest gift you can give somebody. This is the greatest gift someone can have. Once somebody realizes that they're infinite, there's nothing that's stopping them. And just the knowledge can change them. And so once somebody realizes this, which is the story of my time with the mystic in the book, chapter 5, which is the story of Hanukkah and the story of every Jew, every generation. And I believe the story of creation, and I believe the story of why we're on this earth. Yichud Hashem is the purpose of creation. Once we get this, even if we're not the most religious people yet, even if we don't know how to read Hebrew yet, even if we don't know how to say whatever, once we start to get this, not only do we feel different, we start looking around and seeing souls. This is what we spoke about this morning. We start looking around and seeing people and going, wow, I don't just see your actions, I see something deeper. And that's when we really start to light up the world.
The mystics use the analogy of the Flintstone that could lie on the bottom of the sea for 1,000 years. But yet, when you take it out and you rub it against each other, the spark will still come out. So it's there. It's always there. It just needs to find a way to, like you say, we got to find a way to unlock it.
Yeah.
This is coming from Facebook Live. Please ask Charlie, on a practical sense, what does greatness mean to you?
Greatness is a moment-to-moment decision for how to engage in the world around me. There is no concept in my mind as macro greatness. I do not believe that when somebody holds the trophy over their hands, at that moment they became great. I don't believe that. You become great in a micro level. If you hold a trophy, it's because there are thousands of micro moments that you could have given up in and you didn't. When you look back at life, it's the micro. It may look macro. Bob Dylan once said it took him 10 years to become an overnight success, because that's how life works. Greatness is how I deal with everything in front of me on a micro level. I wake up in the morning. How do I get up? When do I get up? I see my spouse. What does he or she see when he looks back at me? I see the kid who just spilled the milk, and it's not really their fault, but I'm annoyed. How do I go to school, I go to work, I live in this world. I'm constantly engaging in the virtual reality called my life. And every moment that I go all in, every moment that I try to do for someone else, every moment that I try to be better in the situation, every time. And if you read the book, there's thousands of subcategories of what I'm talking about, but every time that I engage the world in the right way, I have achieved one bit of micro greatness. That's it. And if I fail at 2:00, it doesn't mean I can't win at 3:00. And if I fail for a full year of my life, it doesn't mean I can't win in the next year. And if I fail at a relationship, it doesn't mean I failed the next relationship. I've got parents telling me that they think they messed up their kids, which I disagree with, but it doesn't matter. The concept that I messed up means I can't get it back. It doesn't exist in the spiritual world. God didn't create a world that stops. Everything regenerates. We work in a circle. Greatness practically, and if you go through the book, you see all the details, but practically is how I act moment to moment. And the goal of the day is to have as many micro greatness moments as you can, and to go to bed a little more tired than when you woke up, and a little greater than you were yesterday.
Thank you, Charlie. This is a good segue to take it to the next level, just to go a little deeper. It's a question my wife asked after reading the book. So one of the points that you made in the book is as exciting and as wonderful as neuroplasticity is in the positive, it plays an equal role in the negative. So if someone erroneously thinks a certain way and repeats that form of thinking, then they're putting themselves in a box. So the question is, we've been conditioned from when we were 3 years old. Toys R Us has been advertising to us what it is that we want and need. We have been conditioned by society, our culture, our surroundings, who's great, who's a success, whether it's a sports star, an actor, a business success, a successful author. Greatness has been sold to us, and our minds have been conditioned by what greatness is for decades. That neuroplasticity has been working in a head start for years. How do you reverse that repetitive mind conditioning that's been going on for decades? How does one reverse that to kind of reset their understanding of greatness?
Great question. So just let's sort of like break it down. Exactly right. Every time I have a thought, the thought creates structure. So if I have a thought once, I've got a little thin thing. That's like if you ever like crammed for a test, right? Let's just like understand cramming. Cramming means you create all these little thin neurostructures, the information. You go the next day, you draw the connections, right? You spit it back. And then because you haven't thought of it, like, I haven't looked at a periodic table since, 10th grade. If you gave it to me, I could barely find water, right? So now in my brain, because I haven't thought about it, it's called synaptic pruning. You take the structure and then it prunes it, right? If you don't think of something for a very long time, you lose it. That's why if you were younger and you knew a song and now you really forgot the song, that's why when you were younger, you know how to do this, right? If you ever learned material that you haven't looked at for 20 years, you sort of remember-ish what's happening because your brain creates structure and then loses it. But if you do something a lot, your brain creates rock solid structure. That's why me and you could speak English. It's not because we were born geniuses of the English language and we were lucky enough to be born to be placed in North America. Because we were little. My mom said to me, Charlie, cup. And in my little brain, I saw structure and I heard a word and it cut. And then, over the course of a kid's growth, he makes the words and I stay speaking English. So now it's rock solid. I keep on watching commercials every year. Yeah, I think stuff makes me happy. Where did I get this from? Because they tell me. And I didn't know to question it because I watched it when I was 4. And then 5. And at first it was a bike, and then it was an iPhone, and then it was a car, and then it was a house. And like whatever it is that they're selling me, I never had a moment in my life where somebody said to me, it really doesn't make you happy. We just sell you stuff because we got to be happy, or we got to try to be happy by making money off you. So sure, if you're exposed to things, the exposure feels like us. That's why you see people, and this is Lori's question. It's a great question that just came in from Lori that I'll try to hit as well. That's why you see so much political animosity today, because people are being now exposed not just to political issues, they're being exposed to political I don't even know. It's like gamesmanship. It's like if you disagree with me, then you're evil. When did that happen? When did disagreements become evil? Recently. So you keep on watching it, and you watch the things that are your shows, and that person who you trust says, if you act like that or think like that, then you're evil. And your brain goes, oh my God. Oh, and you hear it. Then you get to work, you see someone thinks differently, and you're like, that person's evil. I can't marry them because they voted against me. I don't know what's going on in Montreal, in America right now. There are people that get married, that are getting divorced over who they voted for presidential elections. That's insane. Where did it come from? Neuroplasticity. Negative stuff. That's why people have habits they can't break. That's why people are biting their nails or reaching for the fridge every time they feel nervous, right? Or reaching for the bottle every time they feel nervous. It's neuroplasticity. Now, how do you get over it? Number one, realize it's not you. It's the computer. It's the computer. The computer works on exposure. Once we disassociate the true me, which is here, not really here, but here, the soul, and my computer, how am I going to change it if I think it's me? How am I going to change it if I have to extract my essence from it? It's your computer. It goes by exposure. Most likely, most people, if they had different exposure, they'd be different. If you grew up in a house that your parents said, that won't make you happy, you'd probably think that will make you happy. And if you grew up on the other side of the political aisle, you'd probably think the other guy's evil. So first is the recognition that it's not you. It doesn't absolve you of responsibility. It just allows you to see that you're the driver of your thoughts. You're not the victim of your thoughts. Second is to recognize that the brain needs something else. You don't stop thinking by not thinking. It doesn't work that way. You don't stop eating by just not eating. The way you diet, for those who are in the world of dieting, is you don't stop eating. You just eat healthier food. You give it another option. You don't stop wanting by stopping to want. You stop wanting the object by starting to want something deeper, by starting to want something more meaningful. When we start to recognize that I have a computer called a brain, now we take that energy, the desire, which is a piece of us, and we spoke about in the book, desire comes from who we are. And all we're trying to do really is just reformat it. I want something a little different. I want to take what I know and just move it to a different source so that what's in front of me is deeper. It's like that in life. You have a relationship with somebody that's destructive. You shouldn't be in a relationship ever again. This happens to people. They get into destructive relationships when they're young, and they say, you know what? Men are all evil. I don't think they're all evil. It could be that woman, when she was young, had a really bad guy. And maybe he was somewhat evil, even though his soul at his core wasn't. Maybe his body, maybe. Doesn't mean that relationships are broken. So you take the desire to relate to another human being and direct it to something more beneficial. So how do we overcome challenges like this? How do we change who we are? Is we have to be much more circumspect with what am I engaging in? What am I listening to? What am I pursuing? And the more we are more careful with what goes into our minds, the more we feel natural differently. So I'll give you a perfect example. Let's take a person who watches and goes, this is my life. This is my life. So I spend most of my life in the corporate world. I know me. When I am sitting in a boardroom for long enough, I just want to be rich. It's the environment. It's the people. It's the pursuit. When I go to my shul and I'm around my rabbi and we sit and study, I just want to be wise. I can feel it. I can feel it. It's a sense. If my exposure is around the pursuit of money, I naturally want to win in that world. If my exposure is around the pursuit of wisdom, then I want to win at that. I'm not going to stop wanting. I just got to be more careful with who I surround myself with. What am I exposing myself to? What am I fighting for? And then I let all my natural stuff just go in that direction. And so, yeah, there are a lot of people that spend their whole lives chasing an imaginary hamster wheel until they get off and go, wait, I want depth. I want more wisdom. I want more wisdom. And they surround themselves with people of depth. And all of a sudden they say, you know what? I don't know how this started or when this happened, but I'm liking this life. And then people are like, what are you, crazy? Don't you know what just came out? And they're like, no, I got it. I'm not going to give up my life. But I don't know. There's something about this that's really deep. You're not breaking yourself. This is a huge misconception. People think that spirituality is the negation of physical. It's not. That's not the Jewish way. Spirituality isn't the negation of physical. It is the elevation of physical. God wants us to have an incredible life. He just wants it to be mixed with wisdom. He wants us to pursue wisdom. And when you pursue wisdom, then you give your soul expression. Then you manage the world differently. And that's in everything. That's what's going on politically right now. We've stopped pursuing wisdom. Politics, in many cases, is sports. I am a giant fan. Not as much as when I was a kid. For those who follow American football, I don't go to a game and be like, well, the other team, he's got a great quarterback. I'm a Giant fan, no matter what. If they lose, I'm a good fan. If the referee calls a play, I'm always going to say the referee's blind if it's against the Giants. Now it's happening in politics. Until I go, wait a second, I got to start looking at different things. First of all, maybe I got to get out of it in general. Different story. But let's just say I'm into it. But I got to start reading things differently. I got to think differently. Maybe I should take someone else's perspective. Maybe I should look at. I got to push myself to depth, or else I'm going to get lost. This is the story of our lives. I look at that woman that I'm married to. If we're still hitting the same fights, if I'm still mad at her for the same stuff I was mad at her when we first got married, maybe I'm not looking at her deeply enough. Maybe I don't know marriage deeply enough. Maybe I've never stopped to study what marriage means Jewishly. Maybe that woman in front of me really isn't the body that I married, but she's the soul that I married. Parenting, marriage, work, life, there's wisdom. And if we don't have it, then the brain goes, all right, I don't know what else is up, so what does the media have for me? And then we get exposed and we go, oh, that's me. It's not me. It's just what my brain has been exposed to. And it feels like us. Because until we can start to associate with our soul and not our brain, we think our brain is us. Our brain isn't us. Our brain works for us. And once you make that distinction, the game changes.
Would it be fair to say that the brain is like a vehicle, a car, let's say, and we're either driving in this car or being driven in this car?
Yeah, that's a great example.
And what you're saying is you've been led to go down that path year after year after year. This is where they're taking you. This is where you're driving on your own. This is the only place you know where to go. And what you're saying is there's other places, better places, wiser places, more enriching places. Take the mind to those places.
Yeah, I'm going even deeper. You're right. I'm saying you're in the car. If this is what you're saying, then I agree with you. You're in the car whether you like it or you're not. Whether you like it or not, you're in the car.
Right.
Period. The question is, do you want to drive? And it's hard to drive. If you're not driving, you can fall asleep. You can scroll on your phone. Like, it's fun to be in the passenger side. Like, I don't know. I drove my kids to Florida once, which was like once and only, from New York to Florida. Like, I was like, let's do a road trip. That didn't make, and then I realized, 2 states down, like, oh my gosh, I've got 21 hours left. Okay. Different story for different speech. But my kids had a blast. I don't know. My wife fell asleep. My kids are watching movies. The 2 kids are hocking and having a good time. And I'm looking at a road for 20 hours. It's not easy to drive. But let me tell you something. Whether you like it or not, your brain's you're living in a car. And whether someone else is going to drive you, whatever that person is, whether that person is the teacher in front of you, the spouse, or whether that person is the media that's sitting around and that gets paid millions of dollars to make sure you look at things, they get you to do what they want. Or whether we take control, and it's hard to take control because it's exhausting to take control. It's called cognitive dissonance. To change your brain is mentally exhausting, which is why most people won't do it. They did some great research when they took objects in supermarkets and they multiplied them. Like if you go to a supermarket, they took, let's say, like sauce, tomato sauce, and there was 1 tomato sauce, and sales were, let's say, here, and then they made 10 tomato sauces. And they figured if you have 1 and sales are here, and now there's 10, sales should go through the roof, right? You have all the choices. Sales actually went down. Because if you have two choices, it's not so hard. Chunky or creamy. But if you got garlic and pesto and chunky, you're like, oh my God, garlic or pesto or chunky. And then your brain's like, this is tiring. And your brain goes, you know what? I'll be back in 2 minutes.
It's the Costco model.
Get it all, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's exhausting. So it's easier if someone else does it for us. But doing it for us is never going to be the best thing for us. Even in Torah, that's what I love. I was a very rough kid growing up. I was not a very obedient child. And when you go to a strict school, it doesn't really work. And I got to tell you, honestly, I wasn't the most religious kid. I didn't grow up I fought hard against Judaism, hard. And the one thing that brought me to this religion, if there was, besides this piece of God being everywhere, there's one thing that brought me into this religion is just how much my rabbis liked to fight. I loved it. They weren't made of glass. It wasn't like, read it, and if you don't believe it, you're going to hell. It was like, what? You got a problem? And I had a problem with everything. And we fought. And then I walked into this thing called a Beit Midrash. And I watched these. I was my first year in Israel. I was right out of high school. I was in the gap year. They took me to the place in Jerusalem called the Mir. And I sat, and for those who have never been there, you have to go to Jerusalem when you can go. And you have to go watch these yeshiva students studying. You'd think you're walking into a library and it was pristine and quiet. You see adult men yelling at each other, fighting over every line. What, are you kidding me? That doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I'm home. Are you kidding me? You have to fight. You don't got to just take it on the chin. You don't got to just listen and nod like a robot. You get to really. And I was like, wait, you could just fight in Torah? And everybody's like, yeah, how else are you going to find wisdom if you don't fight for it? And I'm like, wait, God's not scared. It's like, what is he scared of? It's wisdom. Yeah, it's hard. But this is the place where you find yourself. This is our people. This is what makes us us. Is that we fight. You ever go to Israel? Everyone's always fighting with somebody. Because that's what it means to be a Jew. It doesn't mean in a negative way. It doesn't mean that if someone gets an honor, you're supposed to yell at the person. We love each other. We're all one family. We're supposed to feel good for each other. We're supposed to we're supposed to give our livers for each other. But when it comes to wisdom, we're supposed to fight for it. And once we realize that, and I'll go even further for those that are watching. My rabbi told this to me. I can go back to my childhood now if that's okay. I couldn't believe it, but then I started saying the blessings. And it's every Shabbat we say 3 words. And look at the Siddur. For those of you who check it out, look at the Siddur, check it out. Every Shabbat and every holiday, you say, when you ask God at the end of the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, we say 3 words, Ten chelkenu b'toratecha. Give me my portion in Torah. You know what that means? Let me tell you what it means. It means if you're not involved in this thing called wisdom, we don't get the benefit because this wisdom doesn't come into the world without each one of us. That means every one of us has a different opinion and a different connection and a different thing that bothers us and a different background. And there's one Torah that's spiritual. And for it to come into this world, people have to bring it down. But if somebody doesn't jump into this fight, someone doesn't come to a class, if someone doesn't jump into the conversation, read Hebrew, forget that. You don't come in and get involved. That means that we as a people don't get the benefit of your unique wisdom. That piece is missing. And when I heard that, I'm like, what? I'm not a holy rabbi. I don't have anything to contribute. And my rabbi told me, he's like, no. You're alive. You got what to say. This is the forum to speak. Go fight for wisdom. Give your piece. I happen to love sports. And you know how many times I see the God and Torah and through sports or through business? That's just how I see the world. I'm not a rabbi. I'm like a regular dude. But once we realize that every one of us has a unique piece and we can't sit at the sidelines. We're not allowed to sit on the sidelines because God wants to hear our voice. God wants us to show up and to be part of it. To me, it was like, I can't even describe how freeing that is. To know that I'm allowed to have desires. I'm allowed to have wants. I'm allowed to be a human being. I'm allowed to have temptations. I'm not my desires. And if I just can fight for wisdom and put myself into it, even if I'm wrong, but I'm going to try and I'm going to search for it. To me, that's I think what this is all about.
Charlie, we're coming to the end of which I don't think any of us want this to end, but I'm going to ask one final question, and we're going to close the night. I am going to the end of the book where you go into kind of that life coaching and practical day-to-day stuff. You bring up this idea of either do, have, be, or I think it's be, do, have. Which one comes first?
Yeah.
Do work, have money, be rich. So is it about doing first and then having and then becoming? Or is it about first being and then doing and then ultimately having? And you're advocating for the BDH. First be, then do, and then you'll have.
Yeah.
So I was kind of, I'm talking here like in my own work, working with people, particularly people that can't seem to get over a certain desire, or people that are struggling with certain fears, or people are struggling with being able to give, or insecurities. I often reach back to Maimonides, where he talks about the idea of changing from the outside in, where someone who's, for instance, very stingy, doesn't know how to give. So he advises, give a little bit, just a little, insignificant amount. And the act itself will start forming a good feel, and ultimately it will create a generous soul. Or like what the Gemara says, mitoch shelo lishma balishma. If you do something for the wrong reasons, if it's a good thing, do it anyway, because even though you're not doing it for the right reasons now, the act itself will bring you to do it for the right reasons. So there's a lot of kind of Jewish backing on the idea of what you would call fake it till you make it. The idea of acting in a certain way that's righteous, that's good, even though you're not there yet, because the act itself is going to create ultimately a better person. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, because you seem to have changed that, where you feel that a person should first be, then do, and then have. So just your final thoughts on that.
Yeah, totally. And so to me, if you look at great people in their lives, a lot of times they sort of know, or they start moving in a direction that leads to really exponential growth. And you don't know why. And if you delve into their lives, what you find is that when you grow up in a world where they tell you that if you want to be something, you have to do something first, right? So you're not a great student. Like, who do you think you are? It's the first day of class. You want to be a good student? Do homework, get good grades, and then you'll be a good student, right? That's the world that we grew up in. Do, have, be, right? Do work, have good grades, be a good student. Do work, have money, be rich, right? Do, have, be. But what ends up happening is that we're always waiting to become something. We're always waiting for our actions to make us feel like we are something. But when we're doing the actions, we're doing it with the prism of someone who's not. We are coming at it like a mind and not like a soul. And the reason why I won't let myself be different is because I won't give myself permission to be different, because I live in a physical world. And so I've taught myself that in order to become something, I have to do it first. When someone sits in your office and is stingy, but wants to not be stingy, what is that? What happened? Why don't they just want to be stingy? Now, if someone wants to be stingy and is going to give money every day. Okay, there is a concept, I know, Sefer Chinuch speaks about it, that if you just do things, even though you don't want to do it, which is neuroplasticity, right? Your brain will condition around it for sure. But there's another path which is much more powerful or differently powerful, which is if I want to change, if I want to be more generous, if I want to stop doing my thing, if I want to be a good husband, if I'm constantly chasing this becoming something, then by the time I'm doing everything, I'm doing it from a place that is not that thing. I'm doing it from a place in which I am not. And when you act from a place in which you are not, the actions aren't fully changing you because it's just proving that you're not something. I'm not a good student, so I'm trying to prove to whom that I'm a good student? To the world around me? To myself? When somebody wants something, in the deeps of in Kabbalah, if you want it badly enough, it's called ratzon. It's called desire. Spiritually, you can change your life by desire. The reason why we have something called Yom Kippur is because Yom Kippur proves to us that a person can change his life and never even leave shul. There's a great story in the Talmud where a woman marries a man on the condition that he's righteous. And even if he's done every sin wrong, the marriage is considered to be valid because maybe he had a moment where he desired righteousness. If we think like brains, until we've reoriented and reconstructed our brains, then we're not different. But when you think like souls, here's how it works. You change when you have a desire to change. A person could literally change his or her life by deciding that they're changing who they want to be. And by changing who you want to be, that's who you really are. Now, it may take years until it feels neurologically aligned. It may take years until your brain says, we've now aligned your soul and your mind. It may take years until you know exactly what that person does. But when you walk around and say, I want to be healthy, and you mean it from the bottom of who you are, you're healthy spiritually. And now you look around and go, what do healthy people do? But now that you act, you're not acting in conflict with who you are. You're acting by building up who you are. The ability to change who we are in a moment is a spiritual concept that frees us from this world of I'm not enough until somebody else tells me that I'm enough. Because I got to get a symbol or a letter after my name or a trophy over my head for something in the world to tell me who I am. That's not how it works. You are who you are when you choose to be who you are, whether the world sees it or not. And when you make a real choice who I am, now, if it's not made in a real way, it didn't work. If you make a real choice in who you are, that is the beginning of the change. And at that moment, you look out in the world with new eyes and say, okay, I don't know how to do this. And I got all this brain plasticity that's telling me to do something opposite, but I am who I am. How do I make a change? And you look in the book, we have a whole chapter on this. What do these people do? And then you do what they do, and then you have what they have. And so be, do, have is a way to change your life, in my opinion, from the inside out, which in today's day and age, I think it's an alternative to outside in, but that's sort of what that means. I think you're on mute.
I want to take this opportunity, Charlie, on behalf of our community, to thank you so much. You put your heart and soul in this book. We could see it on every page.
Thank you.
The message is so powerful, and continue being the light that you are for communities around the world. Mm-hmm. You're really, really special, and you're an inspiration. And we want to thank you for giving us so much time tonight. I know we're a half hour overtime, but it was such a pleasure. And I'm getting so many people thanking you because they can't do it live. But big Yasher Koach, Hashem should bless you and your family for many, many years to have the great zchus and merit to bring people closer to their souls, to Hashem, to the Torah. As you say, on a lighter note, I would like to thank you I'm here in Montreal almost 20 years, but as you might know, I was born in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. I'm still a Giants fan.
Okay, good.
So when I everyone has that hook moment in a book when they start those first few pages.
Yeah.
So my hook moment was when you brought me back to that moment of glory.
The greatest moments of our lives.
Patriots and one of the greatest moments. I was hooked on the book right there and then. So it's been very difficult to continue being a Giants fan, but thank you for bringing back those days of glory. And seriously, with all the stories and the analogies, you really bring it down to a level that we could all relate to and understand, and it has and continue to having its impact around the world. So, kol hakavod.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And let's continue to light up the world together. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Please stay tuned. There are many more programs coming up. We will be giving a lecture on the secret behind Jewish symbols and numerology on December 3rd. There's going to be movies coming up as we continue our movie programs. So the Chaver will be sending out all of that very soon. You'll be getting the updates. Charlie, have a good night. Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Be well.